Move down to the basement. I'm sleeping in the master bedroom tonight." My son said it like it was nothing, curt voice, eyes sliding over me as if I were a stranger hired to clean. I stood still in the living room where the ivory tablecloth my mother left me lay perfectly smooth and the good china caught the early sun. He had just returned after 24 hours missing one day after knocking me to the kitchen floor. Now he walked in, breathed in the smell of the bread I'd baked, and smiled like a winner sure his fists had made me obedient. I only answered softly, "All right, son." Then I turned away, hiding my trembling hands as I set them on the drawer by the door. Inside was the paper I'd prepared for months, a temporary protective order, effective this morning. He thought today's table was set to welcome him home. In truth, I was celebrating the day he left my life for good. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Clara Hensley, 69, widowed, living alone in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio, where winter comes early and loneliness often lingers longer than the snow. I once thought my old age would be peaceful, reading, gardening, calling to check on my grandkids. But 7 years ago, my life opened its door to a storm. One October afternoon, Caleb, my son, showed up at the door with 2 worn suitcases and tired eyes. "Just a few weeks, Mom," he said, voice shaky like he might cry. I looked at his face, the boy I'd carried through so many blizzards, and asked nothing else. I opened the door and my heart. The house was too big for a widow, too silent since my husband George died of heart disease. I thought with my son here, at least the house would feel warm again. But weeks passed, then months. Caleb didn't go anywhere. He slept till noon, watched TV in the afternoon, and drank beer in the living room at night. I told myself, he's just worn out, he needs time. I cooked, did laundry, cleaned. Every time I started to bring up job, hunting, I'd see his shoulders droop and hear, "Don't start that now, Mom." One evening, when I cooked chicken instead of steak, Caleb exploded. "God, can you do anything right?" he shouted, and hurled the plate at the wall. Porcelain shattered across the kitchen floor, and a shard cut deep into my hand. I dropped to my knees to clean up, shaking and apologizing. I even promised to make something else just to keep the peace. While rinsing the cut, I told myself, he's stressed. It's my fault. I should have asked what he wanted. That was the first moment I blamed myself, and the moment hell opened its door. After that, the yelling became the house's background noise. Caleb yelled because breakfast was cold, the coffee too sweet, the tablecloth wrinkled. He said I walked too loud, that I even breathed wrong. I started tiptoeing, closing doors without a sound. Singing in the kitchen? Not anymore. I used to love cooking so much I'd hum Frank Sinatra while stirring sauce, but now I held my breath to stay safe. Every morning I got up at 5 a.m., made coffee exactly how he liked it, extra strong, 2 spoonfuls of sugar, and it had to be in his father's gray mug. I cooked 3 different dinner options in case he didn't like one, and still, it was never enough. The yelling turned into touching. First a shoulder shove in the hallway, then a hard grip on my arm when I passed the salt, then the time he twisted my wrist out of joint because I didn't pour coffee fast enough. "Your fault. You're clumsy," he said, not even looking at me. And I foolish nodded. Because if I didn't believe that lie, I had to face something worse. My son, the one I'd raised with all my love and sacrifice, was becoming my abuser. Friends became memories. Nora Blake, my best friend for 30 years, still called weekly and asked me out for coffee, but I had to decline every time because Caleb would, conveniently, need me home. He'd say, "I'm tired, stay and make dinner," or just give me that cold look that told me leaving the house was a sin. After the 10th no, Nora stopped calling. My world shrank to 4 walls. A house with windows but no light. Mrs. Ellison, the neighbor across the street, once asked softly, "Clara, what happened to your arm?" I tugged my sleeve down and forced a smile. "I fell in the garden." Her eyes looked so sad, the look of someone who knows the truth but can't step in. I felt ashamed, not because of the bruise, but because of my own cowardice. Still, I lived like that for 7 years. 7 years enduring, 7 years persuading myself he was just going through a hard time, that a mother shouldn't abandon her child when he's weak. 7 years cooking in fear, sleeping in unease, and existing instead of living. The last slap, the one that knocked me down yesterday, wasn't the most painful, but it woke me up. That day, I'd made a pot of vegetable soup because the money was nearly gone. There was not even $300 left in the account. When Caleb saw the soup, he sneered, "Soup? You want me to starve?" I tried to explain we had to save, that the pension wouldn't come till the end of the month, that we could look for ways to cut costs together. But before I finished, he slapped me. I toppled out of the chair, hit the floor hard, felt my teeth clack. Blood spread salty in my mouth. I heard him say something like, "Clean this mess up, you useless thing." Then the TV clicked on and canned sitcom laughter filled the house. I lay there, back against the cold tile, staring up at the cracked ceiling, and realized I could die here under the hands of the son I gave birth to. No, I could not let that happen. Last night I lay awake till morning, plotting how to get out. I didn't have the strength to fight back, but I had what he didn't, a plan and patience. Today, when Caleb walked in with that smug, "Move to the basement," he didn't know every detail around him. The tablecloth, the pitcher of lemon water, the loaf of bread was part of my final goodbye script. The dining table looked beautiful in the early light, white and solemn. It was the table I once used to teach Caleb how to slice breakfast fruit, to host his 10th birthday party, to listen to my husband read poems when he was alive. Now that table would witness a beginning. I watched Caleb pour water, his eyes bright with that familiar self-satisfaction. "See, Mom? Everything's easier when you listen." I smiled, lips trembling but eyes steady. You're right. He didn't know that in a few hours a police officer would knock on my door, say his name, and order him to leave by law. For 7 years I lived in fear. But this morning, I chose to live in freedom. And that's how it began, with a sentence that sounded ordinary but was the bell that ended my captivity in my own home. His name is Caleb, and he didn't know this morning. The table I set wasn't to welcome him. It was to send him off forever. After that morning, everything fell into a cold rhythm where I could barely recognize myself. Caleb started controlling everything money first. One day he stood in the kitchen holding the envelope with my pension I had just received. "Just let me hold it for convenience. You forget things, and people can take advantage of you. I'll manage it so you don't have to worry." His tone was gentle, but his eyes left no room for argument. I remember how it felt, my hand still gripping the envelope, my thumb pressed tight like keeping that paper meant keeping part of my life. Then I let go, like I always did. "Okay, you keep it." From that day, I slowly had to ask permission to live. Want to buy medication? Ask. Want to go to the market? Wait for him to check the balance. He'd say, "You're a big spender, always buying useless stuff." Useless, to him, was the tea I drank, a gardening magazine, or a pair of dishwashing gloves. He kept my bank card. I had only a few singles in my pocket, enough for bread or a little milk. Every dollar I had to ask for, with a forced smile. Over time, I stopped asking. I learned to read his mood to know when I could bring up medicine money and when I should stay quiet. Every morning, I got up at 5 a.m., I brewed coffee extra strong with 2 spoonfuls of sugar, and it always had to be in the gray mug with Dad's mug on it, the one my husband used. If I poured it into the wrong cup, he'd give me that knife-cold look. "Don't you respect my father?" My feet learned how to make no sound. I drifted through rooms barefoot, the floor cold under my skin. Even my breathing got cautious. I cooked 3 different dishes for dinner just in case. He didn't like one, but no matter what I did, his line landed like a curse. Never enough. I used to play music while I cooked Elvis, Patsy Cline, Frank Sinatra, the songs George and I slow danced to in the living room. Now, if I so much as hummed, he'd growl, "Your voice annoys me." So, I went quiet. The home that once was a nest turned into a steel cage. Everything had rules I had to memorize. Don't turn on the TV when he's on his phone. Don't tidy the living room when he's sleeping. Don't stay on the phone too long. Don't let the water run too hard when washing dishes. I lived in fear of collisions, literal and figurative. His long silences scared me more than his outbursts, because I knew the storm was just paused. Then the smallest thing would set it off. That Thursday night was cold and damp. I made vegetable soup because the fridge held only carrots, celery, and a few potatoes. There was not even $300 left in the account. I was stretching it to month's end. I set the bowl in front of him and said gently, "Try it, there's some chicken in there today." Caleb looked at the bowl, then at me, face twisted like I'd insulted him. "Soup again?" His voice dropped, and I knew what was coming. "You serving me garbage?" I kept my voice steady. "It's just for now. By the end of the week I'll—" Before I could finish, he flipped the bowl. Hot liquid splashed my hand, burning. Soup poured across the table, onto the floor, spreading like a pale stain. Then the slap. Fast, hard, so sudden all I saw was the kitchen light spinning. The chair crashed, I hit the tile. My knee slammed, shoulder burned, and a stabbing pain in my side made it hard to breathe. I heard his voice, distant but clear. "Get up, clean this mess, useless." And then the TV. American sitcom laughter filled the house like nothing had happened. I lay there for minutes or hours, I don't know, shaking, breathing short, heart racing. Blood at my lip, soup in my hair, wind at the window. No one else on earth knew what had just happened. Just me, him, and the walls. When I stood, my back felt split in two. I picked up a rag and slowly wiped every puddle. Each bend sent a knife through my side. I didn't dare cry. I was afraid the sound would bring him back. When it was clean like it never happened, I stood at the window. My reflection was a blur. Gray hair in tangles, sunken eyes, a face bruised and swollen. Streetlight glow made my skin look like wax. I touched the glass and whispered, "Who are you, Clara?" The woman in the glass didn't answer. That night I didn't eat. I sat by the bed, holding a cold teacup, listening to the clock tick. Each beat was a warning. Part of me wanted to run, but another part was tied down by fear and mother love. Even beaten and humiliated, my heart hurt thinking of the boy who once fit in my arms. I remembered him at 8, when bullies picked on him at school. I'd stood on that playground and shouted, "Don't touch my son!" I had promised I'd always protect him, and now I was the one who needed protection from him. Around 3 a.m., I heard the door open. Caleb came back from drinking. The hall filled with beer, cigarettes, and sweat. I held my breath and listened to the heavy steps. His door slammed. Silence. I stared into the dark, and for the first time in years, a thought came cold and clear. If I stay, I'll die. Maybe not today, but soon. Not a gentle death in my sleep, but a quiet one on the kitchen floor in a house full of TV laughter, where no one knows and no one finds me in time. I looked at the little room and the old photos, our wedding, Caleb's birthdays, the beach trip years ago. I saw another woman in them, blonde hair, bright smile, eyes full of light. She'd been gone a long time. I realized I was no longer afraid of dying. I was afraid of dying without living again first. That night, I didn't pray the usual prayer. I didn't ask God for endurance. I asked for courage to stop enduring, and in the heavy silence of that, I made a decision. There will be no next time, No more yelling, no more hits. I wouldn't scream or seek revenge. I'd do what he would never expect. I would get out of this cage and take myself back. No savior, no miracle. Just the belief that I deserve to live. I looked out the window where moonlight caught the raindrops from the afternoon. They glittered like 100 small eyes watching me as if the world were witnessing my quiet vow. Tomorrow, I whispered, everything changes. For the first time in 7 years, I smiled not from joy, but because I knew the fear inside me had started to crack. After a sleepless night, when the first thin light slipped through the curtain, I got up with a body so sore I had to hold the wall to stand. Every movement stabbed my ribs like a small knife, but I walked to the low dresser, the place where, for years, I kept what little freedom I had left. It's an old, dark wood dresser with a third drawer only I knew how to press her. Lock. I opened it with the tiny key hidden in the pin jar. Inside was my worn expense ledger, pages yellowed at the corners. Between lines of careful numbers, groceries, utilities, medicine lay a small brown envelope. I had tucked it there long ago, stashing a few dollars whenever Caleb didn't notice. Counting it now came to $320, not much, but all the freedom I had left. I sat and smoothed each bill. They smelled faintly damp, like my fear, locked away too long from the light. Beneath the envelope lay a small business card with frayed edges. Marilyn Ortega, social worker, Franklin County Senior Assistance. At the top corner was Mrs. Ellison's handwriting, the neighbor across the street. If anything happens, call her. Don't endure alone. I remember the day she gave it to me. It was spring. I was clipping roses when she came to the fence and said quietly, "Clara, are you okay? I heard a loud noise the other day." I smiled and lied. "It's nothing." I dropped a pan. She stared a long time, unconvinced. Before she left, she pressed the card into my hand. "Just in case," she said. I kept it for years, never daring to use it until today. I slipped the envelope of cash into the inside pocket of my coat and tucked Marilyn's card against my chest, where I could feel it with my hand, a small reminder I still had a chance. When I looked up, the mirror showed a face that no longer looked like mine. My right eye was swollen purple, my lips split, bruises spreading toward my ear. Part of me wanted to walk out the door right then, but I knew if I went out looking like that, someone would ask, and Caleb would find out. I needed time, days, for the swelling to fade, for him to believe I'd learned my lesson. In the days that followed, I became the good mother he always wanted. I bowed my head, said yes, didn't argue, didn't meet his eyes. I served meals on time, brewed coffee to spec, cleaned without a sound. When he passed by, I stepped back. I let him see a woman completely subdued. Caleb started to look satisfied. He'd pass me in the living room with a smug nod. "See? Not so hard," he said, smirking. "You just need to know who's in charge." I smiled, empty and hollow, but enough to keep him fooled. Inside, I counted days and hours. I'd waited too long not to be quiet now. "Sunday night," he said. "Tomorrow I'm meeting friends. I'll be back in the afternoon. Have dinner at 8. Make steak. I want a proper meal." I nodded. "All right, son." In my head, "Good. Go. As far as you can." Monday morning was gray. Cold wind pressed at the kitchen window. I heard the lock turn, then the front door close. Caleb's pickup rolled off the drive. I stood still for a few seconds, making sure he was truly gone. The house was empty, just the clock on the wall ticking. My hands shook as I lifted the phone. My fingers were so numb, I misdialed twice. On the third try, it rang. Once, twice, 3 times, then a warm, steady woman's voice. "Franklin County Senior Assistance. This is Marilyn Ortega. How can I help you?" I choked. For a moment it felt like a rope cinched around my throat. No sound came out. I only heard my own ragged breathing and my heart hammering. "I'm sorry. I stammered. My name is Clara Hensley. I need help. She paused on the other end, then her voice softened, like speaking to a frightened child. I'm here, Clara. It's okay. Take your time. Are you safe right now? That question made me cry. I couldn't answer at first, only heard my own small, shaky sobs in the receiver. At last I whispered, No, but I want to be. All right, she said. Can you come to my office today? Or I can come to you if needed. I checked the clock. It was 10:30 a.m. Caleb wouldn't return before 6 p.m. I had nearly 8 hours. I can come, I said, still shaky. I know. Where it is. Good. Meet me at 41 Arlington Street, 2nd floor, room 204. Do you want me to have an officer escort you? No, I rushed. I just need to get there. She was quiet a moment, then gentle. I understand. Bring ID if you can. And Clara, you just did something very brave. I hung up and sat still for a long time. A strange feeling rose, neither relief nor fear. It was like standing at the edge of a very high cliff, knowing one more step means there's no going back. I changed into my plainest clothes, brown slacks, gray sweater, a scarf to cover the bruises. I checked the mirror, less swollen, but the faint purple still there. A little powder to blur it, a touch of lipstick to look less washed out. Each motion made me feel like a criminal pretending to be ordinary. Before leaving, I grabbed my keys, the cash, and Marilyn's address on a slip of paper. I glanced back at the dining table where the ivory cloth lay smooth. Yesterday, I'd washed and ironed it like I was preparing a farewell only I knew about. My hand paused on the doorknob. The whole house seemed to hold its breath with me. In my head, Caleb's voice, "Don't you ever leave without telling me." I tightened my grip. "No one tells me that anymore," I whispered. The door opened and the morning cold hit my face. Freedom smells different, like wind, wet leaves. Life outside I'd forgotten. I stepped out and pulled the door gently closed without locking it. I wanted police to be able to enter easily if needed when I came back. The street was quiet. Sparrows lifted off the fence. I pulled my coat tight and hurried toward downtown. Each step matched a hard heartbeat. Every sound behind me made me flinch. But no one called my name. No familiar engine. Only when I saw the sign Arlington Building 41 did I breathe out. My hand shook so badly I had to grab the rail on the steps. A bell chimed when I opened the office door, warm, light. A few green plants on the desk. A beige upholstered chair. A woman in her 50s with neatly tied brown hair stood and smiled. "Are you Clara?" I just nodded. "Welcome. I'm Marilyn." Her voice was low, clear, carrying a calm I'd forgotten people could have. She handed me a glass of water and offered a seat. I sat, hands still clamped on my bag. Marilyn looked at me without pity and asked softly, "Would you like to tell me what happened?" I opened my mouth and the first words came out shaky like a child learning to speak. "I've lived with my son 7 years, and I think, if I don't do something, he'll kill me." She didn't interrupt, didn't press. She just nodded, brown eyes deep like they were holding every word. I told her about the shouting, the slaps, walking barefoot in my own home. About fear, about forgetting who I was. Each sentence felt like shedding a layer of chain. When I finished, Marilyn said just one line, "You're not crazy. And you're not alone, Clara. From here on, we'll find the way out together." That simple sentence was the first spark I'd felt in my heart in years of darkness. And I knew if I had any strength left, I would follow that spark all the way. Marilyn's office wasn't big, but as soon as I stepped in, my chest eased. Soft light filtered through the window onto the light wood desk and touched the green leaves in small pots. The smell of fresh coffee and a hint of orange bergamot oil made the room warm and safe, a scent I hadn't known in years. Marilyn sat across from me with a small notebook. Her voice was steady but firm. "Clara, remember this. Sons don't have the right to hit their mothers. No one has that right." I lowered my head, tears falling onto my hands. Simple words, but like a key opening the invisible shackle I'd worn for 7 years. All that time I believed I deserved it, that if I were better, quieter, Caleb would stop being angry. Now a stranger told me what I'd forgotten. Violence is never love. Marilyn poured coffee and said gently, "Start from the beginning. Slowly. I'll document everything." I told it all morning. Coffee, fear-filled dinners, punches and insults. Whenever I stopped choking up, she just nodded. Between us, there was no pity, only listening and trust. When I finished, Marilyn set the notebook down and said quietly, "Now we need to do something important. I have to photograph your injuries as evidence." She took out a camera, asked permission, and began to take pictures. The bruise on my cheek, the purple marks on my wrist, the small split on my lip. The shutter clicked, and strangely, instead of shame, I felt relief, as if my pain was finally being seen. She made a few more notes, then pulled a business card from a drawer. "I want you to meet someone. He's an attorney who handles domestic violence cases. His name is Graham Porter. He works with our center and offers free help in urgent situations like yours." I looked at the card and felt that old fear rise. I'm not sure. I don't want to make it a big deal. If Caleb finds out, he'll lose it. Marilyn took my hand, warm and steady. "I understand your fear, Clara. But right now, you need a team to protect you. Not for revenge, but for survival." She paused, meeting my eyes. "If you do nothing, he will continue. And next time, you might not be here to tell me this story." A chill ran through me. I was quiet a long time, then nodded. "Okay, I'll meet him." That afternoon, Marilyn took me to attorney Graham Porter's office just a few blocks away. His practice was in an old building with a glass door and a sign that read, "Legal Aid for Survivors of Abuse." Not fancy, not flashy, but I could feel the professionalism in every detail, from the perfectly aligned bookshelves to the framed law degree on the wall. Graham was around 60, with lightly graying hair and round frames. He stood to shake my hand, firm but not forceful. "Marilyn has filled me in," he began, calm and steady. "You've endured far too long, Clara. Now it's time we take back control." I sat down, heart pounding. He opened a file, laid out the papers, and spoke slowly so I could follow each step. "We'll file for a temporary protective order. This is a legal document that bars Caleb from coming near you or contacting you in any way. If he violates it, the police can arrest him immediately." I clenched my hands. "What if he snaps? What if he shows up before the police get there?" Graham nodded. "That's a fair question. So we won't take risks. Everything will be planned. In the next 48 hours, we will. Tomorrow morning, you'll go to the bank with me to restore your accounts and block his secondary card. After that, we'll file the protective order with the court. Finally, the police will accompany us to serve the order. At that point, Caleb will be required to leave." He paused, his eyes softening. "You won't have to be afraid anymore, Clara. But we'll take it one step at a time, all right?" I looked at my hands trembling on my lap and nodded. "One step," I repeated. Graham gave a small smile. "Exactly. No need to rush. We just need the right direction." Marilyn, seated beside me, added, "Do you have somewhere safe to stay? If you need it, we can arrange a secure place for a few days." I shook my head. "No. I want to go home. I need to. If I stay there one more night, he won't be suspicious." They exchanged a look, then both nodded. Graham handed me an envelope with copies of the paperwork and an emergency number. "Keep this on you. If he threatens you or touches you, call the police immediately." I held the file to my chest like something sacred. For the first time in years, I had a clear purpose. I wasn't just existing anymore, I was moving toward freedom. I got home at the usual hour, careful enough that my footsteps made no sound. Caleb was in front of the TV, beer in hand. He glanced over. "Why were you gone so long at the store?" "Crowded today," I said with a thin smile. He nodded, said nothing, and turned back to the game. I watched his shadow crawl across the wall, broad shoulders, lowered head, the flicker of the TV making his face look like two people at once, a lost boy and a stranger full of spite. I stepped into the kitchen, put the bags away, and started dinner. My hands shook a little, but my mind was steady. Every motion had a purpose. Chop the vegetables, rinse the meat, set the pot to boil. I thought through tomorrow's plan: bank, courthouse, then the protective order. Each step felt like a small stone laid across the river of fear I was about to cross. When Caleb went to bed, I locked my bedroom door for the first time in months. I set the file on the table and read each line carefully, stopping at the bold words, "Temporary protective order request." Below that was the signature line, "Applicant, Clara Hensley." Seeing my name on that paper made my heartbeat change, not from fear, but from hope. I sat down and wrote a few lines in the little notebook I keep by the bed. Tomorrow, I start again. I don't know what the future looks like, but I know I deserve a life without fear. Outside, wind moved through the trees, dry leaves whispering like a quiet blessing. The warm light in my room pooled over the page, lighting up my shaky signature proof that this woman had decided to stand up. I closed the notebook and turned off the lamp. In the dark, my heart still beat hard, but this time it wasn't panic. It was life. I didn't sleep that night, but I wasn't in despair anymore. I lay there listening to the clock tick, each beat a reminder. Just one more day, Clara. One more day and freedom begins. The next morning, the sky was softly gray, wind threading through the trees in front of the house, dry leaves spinning on the sidewalk. I put on an old brown coat to cover the bruise on my neck and wrapped a scarf around my shoulders. When Graham pulled up, I was on the porch with a small canvas bag, some important papers, and my last 3 $10 bills. He gave me a gentle smile, steady and warm. "All right, Clara?" I nodded, took a deep breath. Better than I thought. We drove to Franklin Community Bank, where I'd opened a joint account with Caleb 6 years ago when he was still pretending to be a good son. In my head, I could still hear him back then. "I'll help you manage it, Mom. You won't have to worry." Now, I knew I'd handed the keys to my life to the wrong person. Inside the lobby, the smell of floor cleaner mixed with coffee from the teller counter. A money counter hummed in the corner. My heart sped up, like every little beep was a reminder of the losses I'd been carrying. Graham went first and told the receptionist we had an appointment with Patricia Lawrence, the branch manager. A moment later, a woman around 50 in a navy suit came out with a professional smile. "Welcome, Mrs. Hensley. Come on back. I've been briefed by Mr. Porter's office." In a private room, Graham summarized the situation, calm but firm. Mrs. Hensley's son seized control of her finances, used an unauthorized secondary card, and there are signs of abuse. We want to restore full ownership to her. Patricia nodded and started typing. "Understood. We'll need to verify identity and have you re-execute the account ownership documents." My hand shook as I signed Clara Hensley. Those 3 words, just a formality on paper, made my chest ache. I hadn't signed my name on anything important in years. Every letter felt like a declaration. I still have authority over my own life. Patricia handed me a checklist of what we'd do. Cancel the secondary card in the name of Caleb Hensley. Change all PINs and passwords. Set up automatic alerts for any withdrawals. Each time she marked completed on her screen, I felt lighter, as if another cord had been cut from my hands. When we finished the last item, Patricia looked up and said gently, "Mrs. Hensley, from now on only you can access and use this account." If anyone else tries, our system will alert you and the bank immediately." I looked at her, then at Graham, unable to speak. A lump pressed hard in my throat. I had to breathe a few times before I could say, "Thank you. Thank you for giving me back a piece of my breath." Patricia smiled and touched my shoulder. "You don't owe anyone for this, Clara. You just took back what was already yours." When we stepped outside, sunlight was breaking through the clouds, catching the glass facade and turning it into something like a mirror. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the warmth touch my skin, a feeling I thought I'd forgotten. Our next stop was the Franklin County Courthouse, a red brick building with high stone steps and heavy wooden doors. I clutched the file Marilyn had prepared: injury photos, my statement, copies of financial documents. With every step down the long hallway, my heart pounded. The waiting area outside the filing office was more crowded than I expected. Mostly women, some young, some well past 70. A brown-skinned woman sat beside me with a sleeping baby in her arms. Across from us, a silver-haired lady watched quietly, eyes that seemed to see entire lifetimes. I looked at them and recognized a version of myself in each face, women who had been quiet too long but chose to stand up today. When it was my turn, Graham went with me and turned in our packet. The clerk flipped through each page, checked the photos, then nodded. "Everything's in order. Judge Harper is on duty today. She's very fair." We waited nearly an hour before they called us in. Judge Harper. Short hair. Glasses. A serious face. Read our file slowly, line by line. I held my breath as she turned to the last page. Then, she signed, swift and certain. "Temporary protective order, effective immediately." I stared at the words, hardly believing them. Harper looked up and said, "This order is in effect for 15 days. During that time, Caleb Hensley is prohibited from coming within 500 feet of you, from contacting you in any form, and is required to vacate the shared residence immediately. Enforcement will be handled by the police." Her voice wasn't loud, but each word rang through me like a bell. Required to vacate. I took the order, my hands shaking so hard the letters blurred. Graham touched my shoulder lightly. "This is your first legal shield, Clara. Keep it on you. Don't let it out of your sight." I nodded and swallowed back tears. That thin piece of paper, just a few lines of black on white, felt as heavy as my whole life. For the first time in years, the law stood. On my side, not his. "Now for the final step," Graham said as we left the courtroom. "Serve the order and make sure he leaves." I stopped in the lobby, my heart slamming. "Today? Right now. We'll go with the police. I won't let you face him alone." We drove to the Franklin police station. The intake room smelled like paper, ink, and old coffee. Graham presented the order and requested assistance. A young officer came out and introduced himself. "Officer Miguel Ramirez. I'll be handling this." He was tall and solid, his eyes steady but not cold. When we shook hands, he said, "Mrs. Hensley, we're here to protect you today. I need to confirm, do you believe he's home now?" I nodded. "Yes. He usually gets back before 6. It's just past 4:30. Good. We'll arrive before he expects us. I'll be the one to read the order. You stand behind me and don't say anything unless necessary." Graham looked at me, voice low and sure. It is the hardest part, Clara, and the most necessary. Remember, you've done nothing wrong. Everything you're doing today is to protect yourself." I gripped the file. Fear and relief pushed against each other inside me. It felt like climbing a steep hill with a cliff ahead and fire behind. There was no going back. As we got into the patrol car, a siren wailed somewhere in the distance. Light rain began to fall, pattering on the windshield and sliding into long streaks. Through the glass, I watched the trees blur. A drop rolled down my cheek. I couldn't tell if it was rain or a tear. Graham asked softly, "Clara, do you want me to speak before the officer reads the order?" I shook my head. No, I want to witness it. I need to see it with my own eyes. Ramirez nodded. Good. When we arrive, just stand still. Mister, Porter and I will handle the rest. The car turned onto my street, the white picket fence coming into view. I drew a breath, my heartbeat pounding like a drum. My house, once a haven, then a prison, was about to be returned to its rightful owner. I tightened my fists and whispered a prayer. Lord, give me the strength to stand. We pulled up to the drive. Ramirez stepped out, the black rain shell draped over his shoulders. Graham turned to me with a small smile. It's time, Clara. I nodded and stepped onto the cold, wet ground. The order shook in my hand under the light rain, but I didn't hide it. For the first time in years, I wasn't hiding. Ramirez climbed the steps and knocked hard. The sound echoed through the rain into every wall that had held my fear. Footsteps inside, then Caleb's voice, rough as ever. Who is it? I swallowed and tightened my grip on the file. Franklin Police, Ramirez called, calm and clear. I need to speak with you, Caleb Hensley. With a single knock on the door, 7 years of fear cracked like glass. Do you feel that's the moment most worthy of saying enough? Tell me how it felt to you. In that moment, I realized every painful road I'd walked these 7 years led here, and I was ready to step out of my cage for good. The patrol car turned into my drive, its tires scraping over the wet gravel. Through the fogged window, I saw Caleb's silver pickup already parked by the garage. My chest tightened. He was home. Every cell in my body stretched taut, afraid, and determined. Officer Ramirez killed the engine and looked at me. Rain traced long lines down the windshield like time itself, long, cold, and irreversible. Clara, he said, voice low and crisp. When I go in, you stand behind me. Don't speak, don't argue, don't react if he gets heated. The law will handle it. Understand? I nodded, though my throat was dry. I understand. From the back seat, Graham handed me the order sealed in a plastic sleeve. Keep it in your hand. If he resists, just hold it up. Don't say a word. I squeezed the page until my palm warmed. Edit. One sheet of paper, the only thing between me and 7 years of terror. Ramirez opened the door and the rain rushed in, along with the heavy sound of boots on the wooden steps. He knocked 3 decisive times. The echo carried across the porch. I stood a few feet behind him, hearing my heart thud like a drum. The door swung open. Caleb stood there, hair a mess, wrinkled t-shirt, face flushed. His eyes slid past me and locked onto Ramirez. What the hell is this? He snarled. Why'd you bring cops to my house? Ramirez didn't budge. His tone stayed even. Mr. Hensley, this is not your house. This is the legal residence of Mrs. Clara Hensley. We're here to enforce a temporary protective order issued by the Franklin court this morning. For a second, Caleb's face went pale. Then it burned red. What? What kind of joke is this? He whipped toward me, voice scraping like metal. Mom, what did you do? I didn't answer. Ramirez took a half step forward, blocking his line to me. You have 60 minutes to collect essential belongings and leave. You are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Mrs. Hensley. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. You don't have the right. We have a court order. Graham cut in, holding the paper out. You may read it, but you can't keep it. Caleb snatched it, eyes scanning fast. I watched his throat twitch and his jaw clamp tight. He started crumpling the page, but Ramirez stepped in, firm and final. You're obstructing enforcement. Calm down, gather your things, and go. In that instant, the person in his eyes was no longer the one who used to call me Mom in a small morning voice. I saw only a stranger, furious at losing control. He backed up and slammed his palm against the wall. This isn't over, he hissed through his teeth. You think you've won? You'll regret humiliating me. Ramirez's hand rose to his belt, brushing cuffs. That's a threat, Mr. Hensley. I suggest you focus on packing. The house felt so heavy I could hear the rain tapping the window. Caleb growled and stomped up the stairs. Each thudding step hit my heart like an invisible blow. I stayed still. Graham murmured at my ear, "Don't watch, don't speak. Let the law do the talking." 30 minutes later, the clatter of things being thrown bounced down the stairwell suitcase, clothes, a couple pairs of shoes. He came into view with an old duffel slung over his shoulder, eyes still bloodshot. He stopped at the last step and stared hard at me. "I can't believe you did this to your own son." I swallowed and answered, quiet but firm, "I didn't do anything to you, Caleb. I chose to survive." He scoffed, smirked, then shoved the door open. The suitcase tumbled off the porch, popped open, and his clothes spilled into the rain. I didn't bend to pick them up. Ramirez motioned him away. When Caleb's engine growled, I heard the tires grind the gravel, spitting mud and water. Then, silence. The house felt shockingly empty. No more heavy footsteps. No more, "Where are you?" barked from the hall. No more looming shape in the kitchen every evening. Just the clock's steady tick and the smell of cooling coffee on the table. I stood there, hands still trembling, until Ramirez came back with a gentler tone. "Are you all right, Mrs. Hensley?" I nodded, lips moving before sound came. A long breath left me, carrying years of pressure with it. My knees gave and I sank into a chair, tears falling before I knew they were there. Ramirez set a hand on my shoulder, then made a slow circuit of the house. He checked windows, secured the back door, and jotted a few notes. "The kitchen window needs a new lock." I installed an extra latch on the front door. He pulled a small card and wrote a hotline on the back. "If he returns or even lingers outside, call 911 immediately. Don't go out, not even to talk. All right?" I nodded, my voice rough. "All right." Graham stepped forward and placed a slip of paper on the table. "This is my personal cell. Anytime you feel uneasy, day or night, call me." They left quietly. Ramirez paused on the threshold. "You were very brave today, Clara. Don't let anyone make you forget that." I watched them go as the door closed. The patrol car's engine faded until only the soft rain on the porch remained. I stood and walked the house slowly. Each step felt like a small pilgrimage through the living room, down the hall, into the kitchen where I'd been shoved to the floor. I laid my hand on the wooden table, on the fridge door, on the old photo of Evan, my husband. "Do you see this?" I whispered. I finally did it. I opened a window and let the air in. Cool wind poured through, carrying damp earth and wet leaves. I breathed deep and felt the quiet fill the space where boots, shouts, and anger had lived. For the first time in 7 years, the house was quiet and it wasn't scary. I towel-dried my hair, changed my shirt, and opened the fridge. A few vegetables, some potatoes, a bit of butter, and a packet of egg noodles. I set water to boil, chopped the vegetables, and seasoned with salt and pepper. Steam fogged the glass. My reflection in the mist wasn't the same woman who'd trembled here days ago. When the soup was ready, I brought it to the table. No candles, no flowers, no TV. Just me, a chipped ceramic bowl, and the clean smell of herbs. I lifted a spoon, blew on it, and tasted. It didn't taste like fear anymore. I ate slowly, spoon by spoon, tasting the light sweetness of the broth, the softness of the potatoes, the butter melting at the edge of my tongue. Each spoonful was a statement. I am living. I have taken back the reins. Night fell. I sat by the window and watched the rain taper off. Street lights hit the wet leaves and laid a soft orange on the road. Something in me unfolded not joy exactly, but a new, fragile peace. I murmured to myself, silence. But this time it's the silence of freedom. In the dark glass, I saw my own faint smile, shaky, small, but real. The next morning I woke not to pounding on a door, not to heavy footsteps, not to an angry voice. I heard only the soft clock and saw warm gold slipping through the curtains. For the first time in years, I woke in peace. I walked to the kitchen and made a cup of coffee just for me. No rushing, no flinching, no orders. I turned on the old radio and let a bit of jazz fill the quiet. A low saxophone curled through the smell of fresh coffee and the strip of sun on the floor. I pulled the curtains open and the window, too. No stale smoke, no spilled beer, just wood, sunlight, and the scent of roses from the small backyard. I sat at the table and watched the light fall across the ivory tablecloth, the same place that had held too many rages. Now it held only calm, a new beginning. At noon, I did something I hadn't dared in years. I called Nora Blake. Nora had been my closest friend before Caleb took over my life. We used to see plays, go to charity luncheons, swap recipes. Then one day I vanished from her world, excuses like tired, busy, not ready to see anyone. Truth was, I was ashamed. I didn't want her to see the bruises or ask, "What happened, Clara?" I dialed the number I still knew by heart. 3 rings. "Clara?" Nora's voice, a little unsteady. I choked up. "It's me. I'm sorry I disappeared for so long." There was a pause, then she burst into tears. "Oh God, Clara, I was afraid you were gone." I laughed through my own tears. We talked for 10 minutes, both of us breaking down more than once. Finally, Nora said, "Tomorrow, coffee at the old place? I'll reserve a table on the patio for us." I whispered, "I'll be there. This time, I can come." When I hung up, I sat for a long time, warm and aching all at once. Some friendships wait right where you left them until you're strong enough to come back. That afternoon, Mrs. Ellison, the elderly neighbor who'd given me Marilyn's card, appeared at the gate with a basket of oranges and a few sprigs of rosemary. "I heard it's over," she said, eyes gentle but sure. "If you need someone to talk to, I'm always home. I never lock my door." I squeezed her hand, trembling a little. "Thank you, Mrs. Ellison. You saved me, even if you don't realize it." She smiled. "I only planted a seed, Clara. You're the one who replanted your life." Night returned, and the house settled into quiet again. No TV noise, no clinking bottles, no slamming doors. But the quiet itself made me restless. Every muscle still held the old survival reflex, listening, bracing. I fully charged my phone and set it on the nightstand. Under the bed, I slid the old baseball bat Evan had used when he taught Caleb as a boy. Back then, it was a father-son memory. Now it helped me sleep. Near midnight, I heard something outside. A strange car idled at the curb, headlights brushing the window. I shot upright, heart racing. 10 seconds. 20. Then the engine revved and drove off. I took a breath, went to the window, and wrote the license plate down with a shaking hand. First thing in the morning, I called Graham and told him everything. "You did exactly right, Clara," he reassured me. "Caution is never wasted. I'll let Ramirez know to keep an eye on the area." Nothing else happened, but that alertness clung to me all day. I realized my body didn't yet know how to be safe. It needed to relearn how to breathe, to rest, to believe no one was standing right behind me. In the days that followed, I started learning how to live again. In the morning, I made coffee and put fresh flowers on the dining table. At noon, I walked around the neighborhood, the streets I used to avoid because I was afraid of meeting the neighbors' eyes. In the evening, I turned on warm lights throughout the house, read on the sofa, and listened to the songs Evan used to love. I learned how to sleep again, not with pills, but with breathing. Every night, I counted each inhale and exhale so my heart could relearn a normal rhythm. At first, I slept 2 hours, then 3, then 4. Every morning I woke to sunlight, I knew I was making progress. Marilyn called me every day at exactly 8 a.m. "Good morning, Clara. Have you had breakfast?" "I'm having coffee," I'd answer. sometimes laughing at how consistent she was. Very good. Today is the 6th day you've been safe. I want you to write that number down somewhere. It will remind you that with each passing day, you're a little stronger. Those calls, simple as they seemed, kept me from slipping into the void. She wasn't just a social worker anymore. She became the anchor that kept me in the present. A week later, a letter arrived from the present court, the hearing for a permanent protective order scheduled for 10 days later. I read it carefully, my heart full of worry and resolve. It would be my first time telling everything in court, possibly in front of Caleb. I began to prepare. Every day, I practiced my statement like it was a survival drill. Brief, honest, and not reactive. Graham warned. He'll try to say you're confused, exaggerating, or out for revenge. Let the truth stand on its own. You don't need emotion, just clarity. I wrote the key points on paper: times, places, and the level of abuse. Medical evidence, injury photos, and the police report. Statements from Marilyn and Officer Ramirez. Each time I read it, my hands shook less. My voice grew steadier. I practiced looking straight into the mirror and asked myself, if my son stood in front of me now, would I be afraid? And each day the answer became clearer. No, I'm not afraid anymore. One afternoon, Nora stopped by, with a still warm apple pie. I hear you're practicing your statement, she said, setting the pie on the table. But remember, Clara, your words are not just evidence. They're the story of a survivor. Anyone who hears it, including the judge, will feel that. I looked at her and smiled slightly. You still talk like a philosophy teacher, Nora. She winked. Because I used to teach philosophy, remember? We both laughed for the first time. A laugh rang through this house without making me flinch. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of chamomile tea. The sky was calm, the moon full and bright, lighting up the little garden. The rose beds I'd neglected were blooming again slowly but surely. I breathed in, smelling earth and grass. I thought about the simple things I'd forgotten. Sitting still, breathing, living. No need to prove anything, no need to bow my head, no need to ask permission. In that gentle darkness, I spoke softly, not to anyone in Terriu. Particular, just to myself. I'm still here, I'm still alive, and I will never be silent again. I tilted my face to the sky. No more rain, no more shadows falling across the window. Only moonlight, night wind, and crickets humming like an old song coming back to life. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, one breath of freedom, of real life. And for the first time, I felt something simple I had forgotten for 7 years. Peace isn't the absence of noise, it's knowing you're no longer afraid of it. The hallway at the Franklin courthouse was packed that morning. The smell of coffee mingled with old paper, shoes clicked on stone floors, and small conversations rolled around me like waves. I sat on a bench, fingers laced together, palms cold with sweat. Next to me was Graham in a gray suit and deep blue tie, calm, as if he could organize a storm with just a look. On my other side, Marilyn sat quietly, a file in her hands, laying a gentle hand on my shoulder now, and then, as if to say, I'm here. The courtroom door opened, and I saw him. Caleb. He came from the opposite hall in a white dress shirt and black slacks. Hair combed his face so polished it made my skin crawl. A tall man in glasses walked with him, likely his lawyer. His eyes swept past me, then paused. In that moment, I saw what I'd known for 7 years, arrogance and challenge. But this time, I didn't lower my head. Graham murmured. Look straight ahead, Clara. Don't let him control the air. I nodded and drew a breath. I know. When the clerk called our case, I stood. My legs trembled a little, but I didn't need anyone to hold me up. We entered the courtroom, where Judge Harper was already on the bench, the same short-haired woman with a gaze both stern and even. I remembered her voice from the temporary order. Today, it rang out again. Hearing on the petition for a permanent protective order between Mrs. Clara Hensley and Mr. Caleb Hensley now in session. The room fell still. I could hear the wall clock ticking. Harper looked at me. Mrs. Hensley, please explain why you're requesting the order. Graham gave a small nod, as if to say, be yourself. I stood, gripping the edge of the table to steady myself. I glanced at the benches filled with strangers, but I felt many eyes of sympathy. I began slow and low. Your Honor, I lived with my son Caleb for 7 years. In those 7 years, I lost things one by one: my money, my friends, my health, and my own voice. It started with, Mom, let me hold your money for safety, and turned into having to ask permission to buy my own medicine. I eventually couldn't choose my meals, couldn't sing in the kitchen, couldn't open a window. And if I forgot those rules, I was reminded by hands, not words. I heard someone in the room hold their breath. Harper nodded for me to continue. The breaking point, I said, my voice shaking, was a Thursday night. I made soup, the dish my son used to like. He flipped the whole pot onto the floor and called it trash. When I reacted, he slapped me, then turned on the TV like nothing had happened. That night, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself, and I understood, if I didn't act, I would die right there in that kitchen. Harper made a few notes. Go on, Mrs. Hensley. I'm not asking the court to punish my son, I said slowly, looking straight at her. I'm not trying to get revenge. I just want peace in my own home. I want to live without fear every time I hear footsteps. Graham nodded slightly. Marilyn pressed her lips together, eyes a little wet. The judge turned to the other side. Mr. Caleb Hensley, your response? Caleb stood, tugged at his collar, and smirked. Your Honor, my mother. Her memory isn't what it used to be. She trips a lot, spills food, then thinks I hit her. I only helped her clean up. She's clumsy, forgetful, and tends to imagine things. I've never laid a hand on her. I closed my eyes. That voice, slick and confident, had once made me doubt myself. Harper gestured to Graham. Graham stood and pulled 3 photos from the file. Your Honor, these were taken by social worker Marilyn Ortega on March 8th, one day after the incident. The bruising on the left cheek and wrist is consistent with impact from a slap and compression from gripping, not from a fall. Harper took the photos, studied them closely, then looked at Caleb. Do you have any other explanation for these injuries? His attorney cut in, cool and flat. Your Honor, there are no direct witnesses and no medical records. Everything relies on a one-sided account. Graham answered immediately, without checking his notes. Exactly. Domestic violence happens behind closed doors. If we required a witness every time, no woman would live long enough to tell the story. The room went silent. Harper set down her pen. Objection noted. Caleb leaned forward. My mother is trying to ruin my reputation. She needs a psychiatrist, not a protective order. Harper tapped the gavel. Order! This is not a place for shouting. I looked at him. For the first time, what I saw in his eyes wasn't an almighty rage, but a panic leaking through the mask. Harper turned back to me. Anything further before the court rules? I breathed in. I just want to be allowed to lock my door without fearing someone will break in. I want to listen to music, call friends, plant flowers, and sleep without jolting awake. I'm not asking for more, just the right to be at peace for the rest of my life. The room was so quiet I could hear the first drops of rain against the window. Harper reviewed the file one last time, then lifted her head and spoke clearly, each word like a stamp. The court orders. A protective order of 3 years is granted to Mrs. Clara Hensley. Mr. Caleb Hensley is prohibited from coming within 500 feet of her and from contacting her by any means. Any violation results in immediate arrest. Mr. Caleb Hensley must complete a minimum 6-month anger management program. The gavel struck. Thud. It all ended with a dry, unexpectedly simple sound. Caleb froze, then turned away without a word. I didn't look after him. I only heard the rear door of the courtroom close. Graham rested a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "It's done, Clara." I nodded. No cheers, no bursting tears. Just one long breath, deep, full, and real. Marilyn squeezed my hand. "You did it. You told the truth, and the court listened." I looked at the two of them, then around the room I once thought I'd never have the courage to enter. When we stepped outside, the rain had just stopped. Water streaks on the steps caught the afternoon sun, reflecting three figures walking away: a lawyer, a social worker, and an older woman holding tight to a sheet of paper that would protect her. I wasn't joyful. I just felt lighter. I had survived, and I was still walking. At the courthouse threshold, I paused and looked up at the pale blue sky after rain. I said softly, just for myself, it wasn't justice that brought me back, it was the truth. And today, I dared to speak it. Then I walked down the steps, slow and steady, like someone relearning how to walk on her own legs. The weeks after the hearing passed in a quiet I thought I'd never have again. No more cars stopping suddenly at the gate, no more knocks that made my heart seize. Only ordinary sounds: crows on the porch, dry leaves brushing the roof, the drip of a leaky faucet. I began to love those sounds, as if they proved that real life had returned. Every morning I woke early, made coffee, and played soft music. Light streamed through the living room window and fell across the floor where I used to sit and cry for hours. Now, I laid out a few sheets of white paper and pulled out. My old watercolor set, the one I'd tucked away when Caleb moved in. I started painting again, fine strokes, gentle washes. The first painting was the backyard garden where the roses had begun to bloom after years of neglect. Each time the brush touched water, I felt my heartbeat ease and steady. I realized art wasn't just for beauty, it was how a strangled heart loosens. One afternoon, after the sun had faded, I checked the mailbox as usual. A few bills, a flyer, and an envelope with no return address. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a single folded white sheet with a scrawl in ballpoint pen. "It's not over." The paper slipped from my fingers onto the porch. My heart pounded. I didn't need to guess that handwriting was Caleb's. I'd seen it hundreds of times on bills and notes he'd left on the table. I stood still for a few seconds, then went inside, locked the door, and grabbed my phone. I called 911, my voice shaky but clear. "This is Clara. Hensley. I have a 3-year protective order against my son. Today I received a threatening letter in his handwriting." The dispatcher reassured me and said a patrol would come to take a report. Graham arrived in half an hour. He examined the paper, put on gloves, and slipped it into a plastic sleeve. "Good, Clara. You didn't handle it much. The prints should be intact." "God," I whispered. "I thought it was over." Graham looked at me not just as a lawyer, but as a friend. "I know the feeling. But you did the right thing. This reaction calling right away shows you're living proactively now, not as a victim." That night, I sat on my bed without turning on the light. The door was locked, the curtains drawn, but I could still hear my heart pounding like a drum. Every sound outside made me tense. The baseball bat stayed under the bed, my phone fully charged, the flashlight on the nightstand. I kept telling myself, "I'm safe. There's police patrol. Everything has been logged." Sleep still didn't come. 2 days later, Ramirez called, his voice low and urgent. "Clara, we picked him up last night at a bar on 5th Street. He was drunk and loudly saying he'd make my mother pay. We have witnesses and video. You're safe for now." I dropped into a chair. In my head, I heard someone exhale. I wasn't sure if it was me or someone else. "You're sure?" "Sure. He's being held for 72 hours while we investigate the protective order violation and the threats. After I hung up, I looked out the window at the drizzle. I thought I'd feel relief, but what came was emptiness. Caleb had once been the baby in my arms, the child who giggled at bedtime stories. Now he was the man police had to cuff for threatening his own mother. That feeling loss and release at the same time cut both ways. That afternoon, Graham called again. "Clara, I know you feel empty. But remember, Caleb made his choices. You only protected." I was quiet for a while, then said, "I know. But sometimes understanding it with my head doesn't mean my heart catches up." "True. But your heart will relearn just like you relearned how to breathe." 3 weeks later, the court sentenced him. I didn't attend, but Graham did and reported back. Caleb received 8 months in jail for violating the protective order, plus making threats against someone's life. He was also ordered to complete anger management and mandatory psychological treatment after release. When I heard, I just nodded. Not happy, not sad. Just a slow calm spreading like a lake after a hard rain. I knew justice can't fix everything, but at least it can stop the cycle. Marilyn stopped by that afternoon. She set a small notice on my table. "The community center is starting a support group for survivors. You should join. They need to hear your story, and you need to hear theirs." I hesitated, then agreed. So every Tuesday afternoon, I went to the center. A small room, beige walls, chairs in a circle. Some were young, some older, some with fresh purple marks at their wrists. When it was my turn, I spoke no crying, no shaking, just told it. About fear, about the mirror that no longer showed me, about the judge's gavel. When I finished, a young woman beside me took my hand. "Thank you, I don't feel alone anymore." That night, I came home and looked at my half-finished rose painting. I picked up the brush and added a few highlights, new petals blooming in the corner. For the first time, I realized my life was being repainted too. The next week, Marilyn held a personal safety skills training for the group. I went and learned how to recognize stalking, preserve digital evidence, and use a safety code when calling the police. I learned to create strong passwords, turn on two-factor authentication, and delete old accounts Caleb might know. At one point, I laughed. Turns out a 69-year-old woman can learn cybersecurity like a college student. Marilyn smiled softly. "You're not just learning, you're taking back control." Those sessions made me feel more confident. Each small step, jotting down a strange license plate, sending a report email, checking the door locks, was a reminder I wasn't helpless anymore. One evening, after locking up, I stood on the porch and looked at the block. Everything was wonderfully ordinary, Mrs. Ellison's porch light, soft music from a neighbor's house, a dog barking down the street. I understood that healing isn't a single bright moment. It's a string of repeated choices, choosing to get up, choosing to trust, choosing to keep going. I went back inside, turned off the lights, and lay down. In the dark, the soft tick of the clock no longer scared me. Each little beat was a beat of freedom. I smiled and whispered, "Tomorrow I'll paint again. Maybe this time I'll paint the sky." And as my eyes closed, I knew I had truly started to live again. On the first morning of that spring, I stood in the living room, the room that had seen me bow and apologize for things that weren't my fault. Sunlight slanted through the window, drawing long beams across the tile. I looked around and decided it was time to repaint. I chose pale peach, the pink touched with orange that looks like dawn on a wall after rain. As I rolled on the first coat, the sweet, sharp smell of new paint spread, making me cough lightly and warming my chest at the same time. Each pass of the roller covered old marks, places once dented by a fist, cracks from a rage. Now those walls held a different breath, mine. When I finished, I stepped back to admire it. The afternoon light bounced off the peach and onto Evan's framed photo, making his face look like it held a smile. I said softly, "Do you see it?" I finally brought light back into this house. I turned Caleb's room into a studio. not to erase him, but to rewrite the memory. I spread an old drop cloth over the floor, set an easel by the window, threw the curtains wide for the breeze. On the wall, I hung roses, skies, and one unfinished piece I titled Reclaiming. Every added brushstroke was me taking back a piece of myself that had been squeezed into silence. One afternoon, while clearing an old drawer for supplies, I found a stack of bank statements Graham had told me to review. I sat on the floor and flipped through them. The more I read, the deeper my frown. There were small, regular withdrawals, $100, $200 from my retirement account, labeled for Caleb. I didn't remember agreeing to them all. When I totaled it, the final number made my hand stop. $4,972. It wasn't just money. It was the proof of years I'd been controlled without noticing. I called Graham and told him. He listened and said simply, "We'll file a civil claim for reimbursement." He may not have the money to pay, but it's symbolic, a clear message that Clara Hensley is silent no more. I thought a moment, then nodded. "Do it, Graham. I want the rest of the world to know I stood up." A few weeks later, when the paperwork went out, I felt like a chapter had closed. Not because I wanted to win, but to prove that I existed and that my existence had value. I started attending senior yoga at the community center. The first time I bent forward, my knees ached, my back popped, and I laughed. "This body has taken a lot of hits, but it still knows how to stand back up," I told the instructor. She laughed too and squeezed my hand gently. After a few weeks, I slept better. My breathing slowed, and I woke without that heaviness in my chest. My body was learning how to live again. So was I. Marilyn visited on a quiet afternoon. She brought an envelope and her gentle smile. "We have something for you," she said, opening it to reveal a white certificate with a blue border. Certificate of Survivor Recovery, awarded to Clara Hensley for resilience, courage, and healing. I stared at it, feeling a current run through my heart. Tears came, but they weren't bitter. Smiling through them, I said, "This is the first certificate I've received that only proves I'm still alive." Marilyn took my hand. "And living in your own way." That night, I set the certificate on my desk beside Reclaiming. The lamp lit the word Survivor. I read it again and again until my throat tightened. I started volunteering at the shelter women in the very first days of fleeing abuse. My tasks were small: make breakfast, brew coffee, tidy rooms, and sometimes share my story when someone wanted to hear it. Each time I spoke, some women cried, some stared at me, surprised that someone so calm had lived through hell. I told them, "We're not weak. We just had to be strong alone for too long. Now it's time to learn a different strength, asking for help." A young woman once asked me, "Do you regret reporting your son?" I was quiet for a moment, then answered, "What good is regret if the price is your life?" Real love doesn't require silence to survive. My son chose his path. I only chose to live. Every time I left the center, I felt lighter. By telling the story, I was opening a door for others to step through. I learned something new too: how to say no and how to say I need help. Before I worried about burdening people, afraid I'd be judged as weak. Now I know loving myself isn't selfish. When I say no to what harms me, I'm saying yes to peace. Every night I journaled. Not much, just a few lines, but it became a habit. I wrote down small things. Today I poured coffee without spilling. I laughed looking at Evan's old photos. I slept 5 full hours without a scary dream. At the bottom of each page, I wrote the same line. "Don't go back to the dark." It wasn't just a reminder, it was a vow. One weekend evening, I invited Nora and Mrs. Ellison for dinner. Not a big party, just lasagna, a little salad, and a bottle of red wine I'd been saving. I put fresh roses in the center of the table and played soft music. When they arrived, sunset still lingered in the window frames, tinting the house a warm gold. Nora hugged me tight. "This house looks different, Clara. It has life." I smiled. "It only reflects the person living in it." We ate and talked, told old stories, sometimes laughing until we cried. When I poured the wine, my hand didn't shake. I realized I was no longer afraid of the clink of glasses or a man's loud laugh. No memory held this meal captive anymore. After dinner, Nora helped me wash the dishes while Mrs. Ellison watered the garden. When everything was done, I looked at them, two women who had once witnessed my collapse, now witnessing my recovery. I spoke softly, almost like a confession. There was a time I lived only to be afraid. Now, I live to be grateful. Nora smiled and laid a hand on my shoulder. And to teach others how to stand up. I smiled and looked out the window. Night had fallen, and the moonlight reflected off the pale peach walls I had just painted. No more shadows in the corners, only light, gentle, honest, and mine. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. In a room filled with laughter, I could hear my own heartbeat again, calm, slow, steady. I knew this was no longer the house where I had been imprisoned. This was where I got to live for real. I began that morning by spreading the old ivory tablecloth, the very table where I had been humiliated, shouted at, made to feel like nothing. But today, it was different. Today, this table would become a table of freedom. I wiped every corner clean and set white roses in a glass vase at the center. I chose the crystal wine glasses Evan had bought for our 50th anniversary. I hadn't dared bring them out for a long time because in this house, beautiful things had once become excuses for contempt. Now, I wanted to return them to their original worth. In the kitchen, herb-roasted chicken filled the air with warmth, the scent of happiness and peace. I seasoned with salt, added a few sprigs of rosemary and slices of lemon, then brushed on a little honey to crisp the skin. The oven ticked, signaling the time had come. While I waited, I prepared a tray of vegetables: carrots, squash, potatoes, simple and comforting. Last was my mother's chocolate cake, the recipe I hadn't made since she passed. I set everything on the table: the roast chicken in the middle, bright vegetables alongside, the fragrant cake at the end. Candlelight shimmered through glasses of red wine, and light danced across the pale peach walls. The house felt warm, no heavy footsteps, no sharp breaths of fear, only the quiet breath of peace. Right at 7 o'clock, guests began to arrive. Marilyn came, first the same steady smile, now lighter. She brought a bouquet of sunflowers. "Flowers for those who keep their heads high," she said. I hugged her and whispered, "And for those who no longer bow." Graham arrived next, as put together as always, but softer in the face. "I brought something. Lawyers rarely bring wine, not paperwork," he said, lifting a bottle of Bordeaux. Nora and Mrs. Ellison came together, hand in hand like old friends. Nora carried a basket of fresh, crusty bread, and Mrs. Ellison brought a mint teapot. "For ending dinner, not starting an argument," she joked, making me laugh. Lastly, 3 women from the community book group, the ones I'd met through Marilyn's support circle. They had once come to the shelter seeking refuge. Now they were starting over. One had just gotten a job at the library. One was about to move into her own place, and the other was still in therapy. I wanted them here, because this dinner wasn't only for me, it was for everyone who had walked through the dark and was still standing. The house filled with voices, soft laughter humming like background music. When everyone sat down, Graham looked around the table and raised his glass. To Clara, someone who didn't just survive, but bloomed. The table went quiet for a few seconds. Then glasses clinked. I smiled, eyes wet. "If anything bloomed, it's because you were the light that helped me sprout again." Marilyn leaned in, her voice warm. "Clara, you chose to live, to fight, to heal. Many come here to be rescued, but you rescued yourself. That's extraordinary." I went still. Her words drifted through the room and touched each person around the table. I looked from face to face, each one reflecting their own story, scars and pain, but also light. I spoke, small but sure. For years, I waited for someone to save me. Then one day, I understood no one was coming. If I wanted to live, I had to be the one to walk out of that. I kept waiting to be loved while I didn't dare love myself. Saving yourself isn't selfish, it's the first act of love. Nora nodded, eyes shining. Clara, I've never seen you stronger. When you turn pain into compassion, you don't just live, you give others life. The candles whispered. The roast chicken scented the air. I invited everyone to eat. The soft ring of cutlery on plates rose up familiar, but with a different note. Not the sound of a forced meal, but of a life chosen. Graham told a few funny stories about cases he'd won. Mrs. Ellison chimed in with a tale about a neighbor who planted a tree without the HOA's permission, and the whole table shook with laughter. One of the book club women, Margaret, shared about her first job interview after divorce. I was so nervous I called the interviewer officer instead of HR director. Everyone burst out laughing. That laughter, natural, full, unforced, caught in my throat. It was a sound I had lost and just found again. After the main course, I brought out the chocolate cake. My mother's recipe, I said. She always said the best cake is made with shaky hands and a steady heart. Graham grinned. Then it must be excellent tonight. I sliced the cake and served each piece. When the last slice hit a plate, Marilyn looked at me and said softly, Clara, you've come full circle, from pain to peace. But the best part is, you didn't stop at surviving, you chose to love life again. I was quiet, lifting my eyes to the candlelight. I think surviving is a blessing, but loving life after it has crushed you, that's the miracle. Outside, the sky was clear and full of stars. A night breeze carried the scent of roses through the window. In the kitchen, dishes clinked as everyone helped clean up ordinary sounds I once feared, now pleasant. I leaned in the doorway, watching them, listening to their laughter, and felt a sudden swell in my chest. The house that had been a cage was now a refuge. The pale peach walls reflected the soft candlelight as if they were cradling every bit of laughter. I whispered, not sure to whom, life has returned. When everyone left, I walked them to the gate. Mrs. Ellison turned back and hugged me tight. I'm proud of you, Clara. Tonight you didn't just host a dinner, you held a ceremony for your own soul. I smiled, eyes damp. Thank you for planting the seed that day. No, you're the one who made it bloom. When the gate closed, I went back inside. The kitchen still held the scent of cake, wine, and human warmth. I looked at the table now, washed with moonlight through the window, and felt an odd, clear peace. I sat, poured a little leftover wine, lifted my glass, and whispered to myself, to peace, to those who walked through the dark, to me. I set the glass down and looked outside. Deep down, I truly wished Caleb peace. Not because he deserved it, but because I didn't want to carry hate any longer. Forgiveness, I now understood, isn't about erasing the past. It's about freeing yourself from its chains. That night when I went to bed, I looked at the door. The lock was still there, but I didn't slide the bolt. Not because I forgot, but because I didn't need to. For the third time in my life, I slept without locking the door. A small act, but a big moment. And before I drifted off, I knew I had truly returned to life, to the light, to myself. I began each morning with a small ritual, a hot cup of tea, sunlight spilling onto the porch, and a leather-bound journal waiting on the table. On the first page, written in blue ink, it says, 3 things I'm grateful for today. It's a habit I learned in group therapy. And for almost a year now, my first line has always been the same. 1. I'm grateful for myself. I'm grateful for the woman who didn't give up on those nights when there seemed to be nothing left to believe in. Grateful for these hands shaking but still opening the door to step into the light. Grateful for this heart cracked but still brave enough to love life again. Second, I usually write, I'm grateful for this home. Because now it's no longer a prison. It's a place of peace, of morning music, of the lavender I just replanted on the porch. And third, I'm grateful for the people who walked with me: Marilyn, Graham, Nora, Mrs. Ellison, and the women I met at the shelter. Each is a piece of the mosaic of my return. Now I keep a new rule: clear boundaries, kindness with limits. I've updated my security system, saved emergency numbers, and set up a camera at the front door. But more important are the invisible fences, emotional boundaries. I no longer apologize for needing quiet. I no longer accept things just to keep others comfortable. Boundaries, I've learned, aren't distance. They are the outline of self-respect. Every week I still go to the shelter not as someone in need, but as the woman who leads the craft class. I named the workshop From Fear to Creating. We cut paper, mix colors, knit. Some hands shake so much they can barely hold scissors, but the cuts get steadier. I tell them, our voices were taken for a while, but when we make something, even a small card, we're saying, I exist. One session, a young woman came up to me, eyes red. Mrs. Clara, I don't know when I'll ever feel as at peace as you. I smiled and held her hand. Peace doesn't arrive all at once. It comes little by little, every time you choose yourself over fear. The civil case is still moving forward. Graham updates me often. He says that even if Caleb can't fully repay, the court accepting the case is already a win. The money may never come, he said, but your dignity is back where it belongs. I don't care about the money anymore. I just want acknowledgement that I'm not weak, not controlled. This time the courthouse isn't only where justice is carried out, it's where my passage through is affirmed. On the front porch, I replanted lavender, the flower Evan loved. Years ago, it withered from neglect. Now, as I turn the soil, the scent drifts through the breeze, sweet and clean. Every morning I water it and watch each stem reach up. A neighbor passing by said, "That looks beautiful, like it's brand new." I smiled. It's not new, just given a chance to bloom again, like me. One evening, I opened my journal and wrote a letter to myself from 7 years ago. Clara, from 7 years ago, I know you're afraid. I know you think silence will keep the peace. But silence doesn't save anyone, it only makes the dark bigger. One day, you will stand up. You will find people who believe you, and more importantly, you will believe yourself again. When that day comes, you'll see. You were never weak. You were made to forget your strength. Forgive yourself for taking so long to see it. Clara of today. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, the one that used to hold bills and painful papers. Now it holds the memory of someone who survived and is living well. The next morning, when the first light came through the window, I looked around the house, everything bathed in sunlight. I understood something I couldn't have 7 years ago. Freedom isn't a destination. It's a habit. Freedom is making tea without hearing a shout. Freedom is opening a window without fearing footsteps. Freedom is laughing without looking around first. And freedom is choosing, each day, to live a little more with gratitude and courage. I set a pitcher of lemonade in the center of the table like Evan and I used to do whenever we had company. But today, it wasn't for people who scared me, it was for friends who made me feel warm. I added a few mint leaves, and the fresh scent spread through the room. This house once witnessed my collapse. Now it witnesses my return. I went out to the porch, sat in the wicker chair, watched the wind move through the lavender, and listened to children laughing next door. In that moment, I gently closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and said to myself softly, just loud enough for the breeze to hear, I'm here. I'm alive. I'm free. If someone asked me now, what changed your life? I wouldn't say the law or the help. I would say, it was a choice on an ordinary morning when I decided not to endure anymore. Freedom, I learned, begins with a small choice, the choice not to be silent. And I know someone hearing this today may be in a dark room like I once was. I only want them to hear one thing. The light doesn't disappear. It's just waiting for you to open the door. Thank you for staying with me to the very last lines. I don't know where you're listening from, maybe a small kitchen that smells like morning coffee, or a quiet room late at night. But if anything I've said made your heart stir even once, please leave me a small sign, a comment, a hello, or simply the name of the city where you live. Because somewhere out there, someone might read it in silence and find the faith to begin again. If this story touched you, please tap like or subscribe. So when the next stories of courage, healing, and freedom are told, you'll be there again like an old friend returning. Every comment you leave is a small light for those still lost in the dark. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for being here, for listening, and for still believing that freedom, even late, always finds its way home.